You know, at first I thought I might not comment on this issue at all. Everything that needs to be said about it has already been said, and there wasn't much that needed to be said in the first place, to be honest. But then I realized that this show carries a certain responsibility. It is my solemn duty, I believe, and I know, to single out and mock the dumbest human beings in the country. In this country, this duty becomes all the more sacred and all the more essential when you consider that the dumbest human beings in the country are very often the ones running it. Human beings like Kamala Harris, for example, who is a programmed robot with no authentic opinions or personality of her own. But she's the worst kind of programmed robot because she's a stupid one. Kamala isn't the focus today, but since we're on the subject, I do feel compelled to mention this video. It's a supercut put together by the Twitter account RNC Research, where we see how Kamala repeats the same line over and over again. And this is, it's not even a good line or a vaguely coherent one, but she really, really likes it. Watch.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know? What can be unburdened by what has been.
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 What we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Who we can be unburdened by who we have been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Where we can be unburdened by where we have been and unburdened by where we are right now.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What could be unburdened by what had been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
I don't know if you caught that, but she's saying that we should focus on what can be unburdened by what has been. I repeat, what can be, okay, up here, unburdened by what has been. Did you hear that yet? It's very important that you hear that line, which is why Kamala says it to literally every audience she speaks to. And by the way, that montage goes on for another 2.5 minutes. And we can even leave aside the fact that the sentiment she's expressing is actually incorrect. You cannot reach your full potential or focus on what can be if you are, as she says, unburdened by what has been. That's because you must carry the burdens of what has been. You must be aware of your past and its lessons, or you'll just repeat what has been over and over again until you die. But that's not even the point. The point is that someone on Kamala's team told her this line is brilliantly profound and amazing, and she took that feedback to heart to such an extent that she works it into every conversation. She probably finds a way to drop that line when she's like giving her order in the Starbucks drive-thru. Yes, hi, normally I get a venti mocha cappuccino, but I'm trying today to remain focused on what can be unburdened by what has been. So I'd like a grande Americano with cream, please. Thank you. What I'm trying to say is that our country is run by some fantastically idiotic people, and yet even if you were already aware of that fact, and even if your faith in the intelligence and competence of the ruling class was already as low as you thought it could possibly go, you still were not prepared for this weekend and the saga of Congressman Jamaal Bowman and the fire alarm. So just to get you up to speed, on Saturday, as you've probably heard by now, Congressman Jamaal Bowman pulled a fire alarm in the House Cannon office building on Capitol Hill at a time when the Democrats were trying to delay a vote on a GOP stopgap spending bill. The fire alarm led to, of course, an evacuation, a full response by emergency and law enforcement personnel. And we know that this happened, and we know who was responsible for it because security cameras caught Bowman pulling the fire alarm, because you're in an office building on Capitol Hill, which means that there are going to be security cameras everywhere, especially right next to fire alarms. And that means we have him dead to rights, you would think. And you would also think that his motivation, however stupid it may have been, is pretty obvious. He wanted to delay the vote. Like, why else would you do that? Very, very dumb and an open and shut case, you would think. But Jamaal Bowman has a different narrative, and it's one that, unsurprisingly, the media and his fellow Democrats were quick to accept without skepticism, accepting it as gospel. Later that day, Bowman put out this statement. He said, quote, "I want to personally clear up confusion surrounding today's events. Today, as I was rushing to make a vote, I came to a door that is usually open for votes, but today would not open. I'm embarrassed to admit that I activated the fire alarm, mistakenly thinking it would open the door. I regret this and sincerely apologize for any confusion this caused. But I want to be very clear, this was not me in any way trying to delay any vote. It was the exact opposite. I was trying to urgently get to a vote, which I ultimately did, and joined my colleagues in a bipartisan effort to keep our government open. I also met after the vote with the Sergeant at Arms and the Capitol Police at their request and explained what had happened. My hope is that no one will make more of this than it was. I am working hard every day, including today, to do my job, to do it well, and deliver for my constituents. So, he vigorously denies that he was trying to disrupt official proceedings. Of course he denies it, as that would be a criminal charge and expulsion from Congress. It'd be January 6th all over again, an attack on our democracy, an attack on our country worse than 9/11 and Pearl Harbor combined. But instead he claims that he was perplexed by the door, which was an emergency exit, and he pulled the fire alarm to open it. And several media members and other establishment figures were quick to defend him on social media, claiming that the door and the signage around the door was confusing. So just a couple of examples of this narrative being pushed should suffice, I think. Here's political commentator Matt Brunig on Twitter. Here's what he tweeted. Bowman was trying to walk from the Cannon building to the Capitol building to vote. Unusually, the Cannon exit he went to wouldn't open and had this confusing sign on it. He thought it was saying that you had to press the alarm to get out. This all makes sense. What am I missing? The confusing sign says this. Emergency exit only, push until alarm sounds, 3 seconds, door unlocks in 30 seconds. That's what the confusing sign says. Someone else named Armin Dumaluski commented on the sign saying, okay, this sign is genuinely confusing. And to that, MSNBC anchor Chris Hayes responded, it sure is! Exclamation point. And there was a lot of this kind of thing. Members of the media proclaiming that the door and the sign were downright perplexing. Just a mystery wrapped in an enigma. Like looking at that sign, it's like trying to decipher an ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic. It's who knows? Now you should know that as Breitbart reports, Bowman actually took down that sign and threw it to the side, then pulled the alarm and ran the opposite way to a different door and left. So when the media tells us that his excuse makes sense, they're telling us that is what makes sense. It makes sense that a grown adult man would walk up to an emergency exit and in an effort to leave the building, tear down the sign, pull the fire alarm, and run the opposite way. This, the media says, is a sensible strategy for exiting a building. It makes sense. It makes sense that a grown adult man would react to an emergency exit that way. After all, the sign was confusing, which is true. I mean, the sign only says that it's an emergency exit and you need to push down on the door handle until the alarm sounds. This may mean that it's an emergency exit and you need to push down on the door handle until the alarm sounds, or it may mean that you should walk to the opposing wall and pull the fire alarm and then run away. Maybe that's what it means. Or it may mean that you should do cartwheels down the hallway. Or it may mean that you should stand on your head and sing the 90s hit Tub Thumping. It may mean anything. Who's to say what it means? It's impossible to know. The sign is indecipherable. That is, if you are illiterate and if you've never encountered an emergency exit or a fire alarm before in your life. But almost every adult has, which is why, and I think I can say this about you without knowing anything about you, whoever you are watching this. I can say that in your entire time existing on this planet, you have never once heard of anyone ever, anywhere, pulling a fire alarm in order to open a door. You've never considered doing that yourself. You've never done it yourself. You've never heard of anyone doing it or considering it. You've never been like walking with a friend down a hallway and come across a fire alarm and had your friend turn to you and say, "Is this what we pressed to open the door?" Nobody has ever said that to you. Nobody has ever asked you that. And if your friend did turn to you and say that, you would look at him in stunned disbelief. You might actually start to weep as his stupidity would be at such a level that it would be downright tragic to behold. It'd be like seeing a grown man walking around in Velcro shoes because he doesn't know how to tie his shoelaces. It is dumbness so dumb that you can't even laugh at it. It just makes you sad, if anything. Well, I'll still laugh at it, but nicer people won't. Okay, we're on the line with Philip Patrick from Birch Gold. What are the greatest threats facing the dollar right now?
The key to a global reserve currency is that it is a solid store of value. Well, the dollar's lost 16% of its buying power since the start of the pandemic alone.
So let me ask you this. I have a lot of, there are a lot of young people, young families. What's kind of the pitch for them? Like, why should they consider this?
Being a safe haven asset, when we see downturns in the economy, it tends to go up. The other thing to consider is just track record, right? Gold has been around for centuries. It has a proven track record. We understand how gold works with inflation. We understand how gold typically performs during times of market correction. But if you're looking to protect, to preserve buying power, that's where gold has the advantage.
Philip Patrick, we appreciate your time as always. And if you want more information, you text Walsh to 989898 for your free information kit. Philip, thanks again. And to be clear, this is Jamaal Bowman's defense. His defense is that he's a bewildered dunce who becomes confused and hysterical at the sight of a door. His defense is that he has the IQ of a hermit crab. It's a defense so humiliating and so disqualifying that even if it was true, he'd be better off lying and saying that it was an intentional criminal act. I mean, if that was me and I somehow did something that stupid, I would lie and say, you know what? Yeah, I was committing a crime. Put me in jail. I would rather I would rather go to prison than have everyone know that I am that stupid. I would certainly rather be seen as a clumsy criminal than a guy with the mental capacity of an amoeba. And here's the thing. Whichever is true, either way, Jamaal Bowman is unfit to serve. Because either he tried to disrupt a congressional proceeding by staging a false emergency, or he's an incompetent halfwit who doesn't know how fire alarms work. I mean, it's one or the other. And frankly, I don't care which one. Though I strongly suspect that maybe there's a bit of both mixed in. Whatever the explanation, he should be kicked out of office. He is just another in a large crowd of people in Washington, D.C. who run our country and make decisions that deeply impact all of our lives and yet are both morally and intellectually bankrupt. These are the kinds of people who always are there to preside over the collapse of empires. People whose moral character is in a constant game of limbo against their intelligence, competing over who can sink the lowest. These are our leaders. People who can't even open a door. God bless America. We're going to need it. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.